Perfect. Okay. That was just a little bit of a hiccup, but it's all right. That's okay. You know what? Story of our life. That's kind of the way that we roll. But anyway, awesome.
Just had an all hands company meeting. And my husband, also the CEO, was like, you know what? I actually don't know how this Zoom chat works. Like, I don't know how I am a technology CEO where like I have no idea how to use this particular technology.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. We have we have Zoom, we have Hangouts, we have GoToMeeting, Telegram, WeChat. There's so many ways to contact that it's actually it's a bit crazy, but cool. Let's get started. And you guys have been super patient, and I'm happy to talk with you.
All right, cool. Well, let's get started.
Okay.
Recording is on, right? Right. Welcome to the HackerNoon podcast. My name is Linh Smooke, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of HackerNoon. And I also have Utsav Jaiswal, who's our newly elected Vice President of Business Development and our in-house blockchain expert. So welcome. Today we have a very special guest, two very, very special guests joining us. Alex Tinsman, dubbed the savior of the NEM Foundation. She is the president, and she began her role as the president in January of 2019 after being elected by the community, and is one of only 9% of female executives in the information technology space, which I very much can relate to. And we also have NEM's Chief Technology Officer, Nate D'Amico, who's been in position for a couple of months now, but he's been involved with NEM Foundation for about 3 years. So without further ado, welcome, Alex. Welcome, Nate.
Thanks. It's so exciting to chat with everyone today and talk about what we're doing and where we came from. I don't know about savior, but I would say that this space is pretty exciting, and it's really nice to see more people, everyday people really embracing the technology. So I think it speaks volumes to how we're progressing when you see more diversity in leadership, right?
Absolutely. So to the HackerNoon audience out there, could you, Alex and Nate, share a little bit about yourself, your background?
I'll start and then pass the mic over to Nate. So I have 20 years experience in leadership and in gaming, ranging from marketing to community to management. I started originally managing marketing platforms for online digital assets. So I'm a game designer. A lot of what I managed before was working on League of Legends and Xbox Marketplace and Pokemon and Magic. I was the brand manager for Magic the Gathering. So my whole world has always been about managing online assets. So moving over into the cryptocurrency and blockchain space was pretty familiar for me. And I think what attracted me most is that it had such an opportunity to disrupt technology in such a meaningful way. And so I've been with NEM for about 3.5, maybe 3.5, 4 years, but in this role as leading the foundation just in the past year. So.
Cool. What about you, Nate?
So my name's Nate D'Amico, and similar to Alex, I've been working in the presumably like solely in the enterprise space, a little bit of mobile, but mostly just back-end enterprise software since about 2000. By trade was CS math undergrad, and then just being an engineer for a few years. And then right around 2004, with the kind of advent of the kind of commercial open source space, I've been working heavily in that space since then, pretty much. So things ranging from CRM and back office to kind of moving into cloud and data center automation stuff. And then the last, that's kind of like the first decade, and then the last decade has really been around a range of distributed systems. So if you're familiar with like the big data movement in the enterprise and things like Apache Hadoop and Apache Spark and the like, working with a lot of around those projects and working in the Apache Foundation. And that kind of, I guess, was a good seed between data center management stuff and distributed systems. That kind of piqued my interest. And blockchain is, distributed ledgers is kind of like a natural extension of that, since it is kind of just like a new form of database and way distributed systems will interact. So that kind of planted the seed. And while I was working on some other areas, just through some friends and interested connections, they kind of like, introduced and pulled me into the space. That's how I kind of got introduced. And it's kind of just like with a lot of people, you're kind of either in or out. Once you get into it, if you like it, you kind of go deeper in the crypto and ledger space. So, so yeah, that's kind of my background and origin into this project.
Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting to have a mix of talent, like having Nate, and we have such a big team, and we're all working and doing amazing things in this space. So it's really nice to meet and chat with everyone.
Okay, so my first question for both of you, and this might be a big one, but I really want to ask this question for anyone who is in the blockchain and crypto space. What do you think is holding cryptocurrencies back from getting broader adoption? So for background, in America, only 8% of the current population owns digital currency. And compare that to, for example, gun ownership, which is currently around 32%.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
No, go ahead. You can start.
Like the first two things that kind of pop in my head with that question, especially, so I'm based in San Francisco Bay Area. So therefore, obviously, United States, I have a certain perspective is, first, United States, typically, even though we're producing, especially here in Silicon Valley, we're producing a lot of the core tech that is adopted in the world. We're not while we're the originators in certain key parts of tech that have existed and been launched over the last several decades, we're not the originators of the blockchain space, but key contributors. But on the flip side, these key tech areas, while we're originating a lot of it, we're not the leading adopters of it. So like, if you look at just bandwidth and pure wireless connectivity, I can get as good or better 4G signal in my wife's family remote village in Greece as I can in Palo Alto, right? Which is in the heart of Silicon Valley, right? So that's kind of like an extreme example. But then I think coupled with that happens across a wide range of tech adoption here. So we're producing a lot, but we're also not on the cutting edge. And then on the flip side, the other thing is just a very key aspect is, unfortunately, regulations and guidance around those regulations, especially when you look at it through, there's the tech side in adoption. And then when you talk about digital assets and cryptocurrencies, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of like underground adoption. But when the SEC's kind of the bellwether and the kind of leader in the space globally, as far as like G20 countries and how they're going to approach it, they've taken a very, not even a heavy-handed approach, it's a hands-off approach. So just by having a lack of guidance, that it's not stopping people from adopting, but it's also, if you look at like where the volume of adoption is going to come from, Main Street investors, as they refer to them, it is not a friendly environment, right? So while some of us are willing to do it, like my parents, there's the tech side as well, right? But so I think a little bit of time and pressure, not even loosening regulations, just having some improved guidance on the ups and downsides, changing some of the rules around, if I buy something with Bitcoin for $100, am I going to have, taxes and gains and losses, right? Like guidance on that. And then as an industry collectively, I think the last point I'd kind of make is user experience is not great across the board. It's better than it was a year ago, which was better than it was 4 years ago. But an easy example is just look at like Lightning Network. It's an amazing like platform that should hopefully be building for the future. But there's a lot of UX things to solve to like bring it to the masses. So that applies to Bitcoin, it applies to us, it applies to everyone in the space. So that's kind of like a couple key areas I see holding back the states, at least, and the space in general.
Yeah, regulations are have been tricky, and they're constantly changing. So right when you think you know the way to navigate things, it changes, right? So having compliance and working through the legalities, and then just to touch on kind of what Nate was saying, it's also about user experience, right? So we have use cases that are building, but that we've been building and working with partners like the Crow Nation tribe. Ran a pilot using a sovereign for sovereign e-governance, using basically a mobile app that was built out on NEM, that had the wallet, had identity, had a voting tool, had land registry, all of this. And it was pretty interesting to see the Crow tribe interact, people from all different age groups, piloting. They didn't know it was blockchain. They just knew it was an app, and just the pain points around getting people to understand their own identity, and how that works in this space, how they can protect their information. So I think it's kind of interesting. It's a mix of regulations. It's a mix of, is the technology ready? It's a mix of how it's being used. It's a mix of what's available in your region. So we're both in the United States. Regulations play a huge part.
Absolutely. So you mentioned NEM. NEM has had such an interesting history in the crypto space. I mean, for the audience who don't know, it was founded by a Bitcoin Talk user and is completely written in JavaScript. So do you have any interesting tidbits, or you want to dive a little bit more deeper into the company's history and origin, so we understand a little bit more about the foundation?
Yeah, I think so. NEM was designed with the idea that it was to be a really community-oriented cryptocurrency, right? So it started back in 2014, like you said, on Bitcoin Talk, and I think the alpha version was released back in, I think it was in June of 2014. So I mean, it's been around. It's one of the more OG and tried and trusted trusted coins. I think it's pretty interesting to me. The foundation is only a couple of years old, so it's had a pretty interesting history too. But NEM in general had the roots of the technology came from the idea of financial freedom and equality for everyone, and you still see the roots of that today. As far as the history, it's been pretty interesting to see where we've come from, being a conversation on Bitcoin Talk to being a top 20 coin, to having highs and lows in the industry around everything from bear market, the impact of a bear market, to even NEM overcoming, being lumped in with a hack of a exchange that kind of crippled the industry and changed the way that Japanese regulations occurred. And but I think what's pretty interesting about the trajectory with the path for the NEM platform is that it was so forward thinking with the security features that were in place, that it has always overcome and remained, even when all these other coins on platforms kind of went away. So I think it has a bright future with the technology. The release of, we have a new release coming up called Symbol from NEM, and it's the next evolution of the NEM platform. But platforms like NEM stick around because they're forward thinking with their features and their abilities, right? So it's pretty fascinating to see the history.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so you mentioned in your answer the kind of principle of community, equality, and you are elected by the community.
Yeah, by the community. So our our community, every couple of years has nominated its leadership. And one of the things that we do is we do public elections on the public chain, so real time, so you can see, the elections and process, and it's very, it's pretty exciting. But in general, the past few years, we've really seen more enterprise leaders coming into the space, folks like Nate. We have a new C-suite coming in, all elected and all very, very capable in bringing the platform, to life through the NEM Foundation. I don't know how many people actually know the difference between NEM and the NEM Foundation, though. They are separate. They're not the same. So the NEM Foundation is actually the NEM Foundation is responsible for education and creating tools and helping with awareness and advocacy, but it's actually separate from the NEM platform itself, right? So there's the NEM ecosystem, and then we're just one part of the ecosystem, right?
Cool. I mean, personally, as a woman in the crypto tech, information technology industry, it's incredibly interesting to me that you are basically the face of NEM Foundation and one of just 9%, women executives. So
yeah,
how do you feel about smashing that boys club that is the crypto world?
It's kind of interesting. So I'd mentioned I'm from gaming. So one of the background, so it's kind of fascinating to me because to me, I was intrigued by cryptocurrency and blockchain because it felt like a game to me, right? I originally came in as an investor. My husband and I have board game companies and have worked in this gaming for a long time. We'd get our royalties from the projects that we worked on and put them into gold and silver and stock market. And just, you're trying things out. And then we came across Bitcoin and Ethereum and began to look more into it, and pretty comfortable with online communities and especially gaming. Not my first time at this rodeo. So began to look into NEM, and the community was so different than any community of other cryptocurrencies out there. And the more time I spent, the more intrigued I was. And having been on the forefront of technology and entertainment in my past job at Microsoft and Riot Games and Hasbro, and seeing what happens when you combine technology with major brands, it was exciting to me because I could see the potential with NEM and I wanted to contribute. So like you said, I began to create videos and content, be a content creator, and then really just began to work my way up in this system. And it's weird because I'm an outlier. I don't look anything like what you would expect. I don't even think it's about being female. I think it's just who I am is different than what you would typically see in the industry. It's more folks like Nate, right? It's more folks that, have long history in open source, and they've, they participate in a different way. But for me, it was, I want to be a part of this movement. I believe in this movement. I want to be a part of change. The only way to do that is to educate yourself. And the only way to educate yourself is to get dirty. Get dirty with the code, get dirty with the channels, understand, get into the thick of it. And then it gets really exciting because it opens up the opportunity for blockchain and cryptocurrency, opens up the opportunity for anyone, no matter where you are, what your skill set is. Everyone has the same playing field, right? Mm-hmm. Information, you can access information, jump right in immediately. And so I don't really think of it as a female thing. I think of it as this is an empowering tool that anyone and everyone can be a part of. Everything is accessible to you, and you can build and be a part of it. So to me, it's not gender, it's a movement. And I wanted to be a part of that movement. And now I am, and have been for a long time, and will be. Continue. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can totally.
Yeah, I mean, Nate, do you have any? I mean, you've seen a lot of folks come in and out, but I don't know. It seems like it is opening up and has been opening up to diversity for a long time. Half of our leadership team is female.
That's amazing to hear.
Yeah, I mean,
not just because it's female.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's, heightened awareness the past, let's say 4 years, not just this industry, right? You take a culmination of certain events in the public eye and entertainment and things that have occurred in the Me Too movement. And like, I think everyone's pretty aware that certain industries, whether it's entertainment or technology, have certain, just history.
Blind spots.
Yeah, right. Like blind spots and longevity with kind of behaviors and stuff. So I think that awareness is heightened, which is, it's a starting point, right? Like this is kind of like the start of the conversation in the movement, right? Like, so, and again, it's pretty prevalent. So I'm based in San Francisco, just outside San Francisco. So a good example is California. Starting the new year, there's a new law that was passed that essentially puts a restriction that publicly traded companies have to have a female board member. And so that is kind of yet a next step. And there's dialogue about, well, should you do, forced diversity on a company? And then, the flip side is preventing the dynamic of, well, other countries have done it, such as Norway and Germany and stuff. So anyways, I think as much as it's skewed in the blockchain space is a bubble within the bubble of the tech industry. And it's prevalent kind of throughout it. And then other industries, it exists as well. So I think I think the movement's definitely good though. And the awareness is quite heightened.
Yes.
Especially in the past, like 1 to 2 years in the blockchain space, right? And so it's also
yeah, I think that's true. The another thing to think about, if I do have a layer of being female, right? There's one thing I've learned from leading the teams is to show up. And so what I mean by that is to use your voice and to educate yourself. And I have that with everyone, right? It's not just enough to say, you see a problem and you want to acknowledge it and you want to work through it. And you actually have to solve for it. And that means you have to show up and be a part of it. So the females on the team, it's pretty interesting. The voices that have emerged from them is even in the way that we talk about the brand and we see the brand, we promote the brand, from banners. There's a mix of men and women in website banners, right? The language that's used in our contracts is gender friendly. We've been really cognizant to make sure that we're welcoming for all, but it's not just a focus of gender. It's how can we go wider? How can we expand? How can we create tools that can pull more people in, regardless of where they're at, their gender, their economic status? I mean, that's the beauty of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, is that anyone can kind of create a new future using the technology, and I think that's powerful, right? I think that's very powerful.
Without risking putting you on a pedestal and, diving even deeper into this female gender thing, like I just really want to, point out to the fact that it's great. It's great to have someone like you so assured of herself, with incredible experience and background and diverse background to, like bringing news perspective into kind of like a industry where you see a lot of people with like different background than you. Like you bring some fresh new perspective to it.
Yeah.
I guess my question to it would be, what would you say to aspiring female persons in tech and in crypto space who want to kind of move up and just maybe look up to you, as someone who they can aspire to be?
Yeah, I think there's 3 things that I usually focus on. One is to be fearless, right? So Nate has seen time and time again, when if I don't know something, I'll have to go and ask, right? Or if I need some help and I'm like, trying to set this up, how do I do this? I'm not doing this right. Like, it's failure to me, and I've encompassed failure as a lead of a blockchain company, right? This is a bear market. This is tough, right? I had I had a huge, when I came into office, I had 100 team members that I was responsible for. You have to be fearless and strategic about where you spend your time and focus. The second thing I think about for me is to know, as a female, is to know your worth, right? So I'm very cognizant also of what I bring to the table. And one thing about encompassing diversity is having an appreciation for all the different types of personalities that are on the team and that we work with, and the kind that we want to recruit. So with Nate and with the rest of the team, I'm an empathetic leader. Everyone knows that. It's not because I'm female, it's because that's my personality. I'm an empath, right? So that's how I am. So everyone knows that. So we brought in a consultant to do basically Harrison assessments. This is different than most maybe blockchain companies. They probably think this is like, really touchy stuff, but I wanted to be very specific about the kind of culture that I curated. So, with my teams. So, and I say my, because this is the direction that as a empathetic leader, I chose to take the foundation. Taking a look at doing Harrison assessments and understanding the strengths and weaknesses and communication styles. When I first came on board, we have a governance, a council that helps with our governance and executive committee. Not all of them spoke English. Some of them were English as a second language. Brought in translators on day one so that everyone had the same information at the same time. So it's not just mapping out where we're at now, it was also mapping out future needs and the kind of skills that we would need. It's why we brought in Nate. It's why we brought in, a few other folks, and it's why we will continue to recruit and have the right kind of culture, because I wanted more diversity and more people that would bring a new perspective and talent to, quite frankly, not just to NEM, but to the blockchain ecosystem in general. I want people that are ethical. I want people that are have grit. I want people that will go the extra mile, that when they fail, they'll get back up, that are strategic with the way that they think, that will be supportive and work together and collaborative. Again, that's not what you see necessarily in this space. And I think it's okay to stand up and say, we can do better. I don't want to be a part of that. I'm going to create a new kind of culture here. And then when you start to bring people in, really beautiful things can happen. And Nate and the rest of the team have created tools and contributed in meaningful ways because there was an understanding from the very beginning and a strategy. This is the kind of talent we want. This is how all of our talent works together. And this is what we are going to build and do now that we have the talent and the resources in place. It's damn exciting.
It really does sound extremely
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, you can tell, like I'm also
passionate about
it. I'm passionate, and everybody knows. And it's kind of interesting because Nate is passionate too, and the rest of the team is, but it shows up in different ways, right? This is my personality, but my personality and how I view contributing to the ecosystem. There is a place for people like me just as much as there's a place for traditional developers like Nate, who you would recognize more in the ecosystem, right?
Speaking of the blockchain ecosystem, so our resident blockchain expert hasn't talked too much at Utsav, and I know that he's prepared a lot for this interview, bunch of technical questions. So Utsav, how about you take over a little bit from here?
Right. So hi guys. So we have heard about NEM for a really long time. You guys have been with the team for a really long time. And there's this huge debate on do you want the code to be on chain or do you want the code to be removed from the chain? So companies such as Ethereum and even with the Ethereum and all of those, they try to have the code on the chain. They want to have that code as law philosophy. Whereas with NEM, what we see is that they want to have code removed from the chain. So like, what like has been your rationale behind this, and like where do you think it leads to when we talk about in terms of decentralization, when we talk about in terms of centralization of powers, distributed computing, and like whatnot?
So yeah, it's a good question because it's pretty much one of our main differentiators, at least as far as how people use the system, right? Whether it's a private chain or a public chain. So the easiest way to kind of like attack that question from like our mindset is, if you think of a pie chart of use cases that might or might not fit on blockchain, obviously we're still in the early days, and we'll probably discover in the next 5 to 10 years what, it's right now it's a lot of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. So the last 3 years was everything goes on the blockchain. And then during crypto winter, it's like, maybe not everything, but a lot of stuff should go on blockchain. And then, so we'll see what kind of how it shakes out. But our mindset is in that pie chart of use cases that are either really good or kind of good for blockchain and distributed ledgers, that the highest percentage do not require or demand 100% trustless operation between all parties that are interacting on that solution, and B, 100% decentralization. So in our world that are heavily focused on the kind of business use cases and enterprises and the like, while public crypto and asset holders and the cryptocurrency is definitely a core part of the network that powers it in the ecosystem, if you're an enterprise and you might have some use cases that require 100%, I don't trust anyone I'm working with this current solution that I'm trying to deploy. But the realities are that's typically not the case. You probably have some level of trust, even if it's a consortium that you're working with competitors on. So that's kind of like the foundation of the mindset and approach is, while there are some use cases, if you carve it out in a pie chart, it's definitely not over 50%, and it's probably under 20% or something, right? Like it's probably like an 80-20 rule where 20 or less are, I don't trust anyone I'm interacting with, and I need to not trust everyone and have everything 100% decentralized. So the next kind of part of the mindset is, if you think of it from like an enterprise and a company perspective, if you're going through like digital transformation and you're moving to cloud and you're modernizing for mobile and you're moving from monolithic services to microservices, it's yet another wedge thrown in your digital transformation to then say, oh, by the way, besides all this other digital transformation planning you're doing, you think you might want to adopt blockchain or distributed ledgers. By the way, your engineers need a special skill set, and they need to learn specific coding, whether it's Solidity or Viper or other, at least in the terms of the Ethereum world, or the equivalent on any other like on-chain contract kind of system. So when you start looking at it from like an enterprise and just company adoption, what would be most optimal? I take my current engineers with their current knowledge and expertise on writing backend microservices or monolithic services and web applications, and using JavaScript or Python or Java or whatever the language of choice is. They're used to using REST interfaces and cloud services that are in-house as well as third parties. And so that's how our system operates. It gives you all the facilities as a smart contract type system, except we just kind of give it to you in this kind of batteries included building block nature. So we say, hey, we give you on-chain asset management. We give you the ability to control those assets and how they're created and what rules govern them once they are created and exist on chain. And then all you do is do what you do. Write your normal applications, use your normal PKI kind of setup. You're used to managing, encrypted data sources and, public key infrastructure in general. Like you've already been doing that for maybe years or decades. So everything is kind of familiar. And so when you think of this ongoing digital transformation outside of the blockchain and ledger adoption that a company might be doing, you're moving the needle very small. You say, hey, well, you're already managing these apps. Now you just have to securely manage the key that's doing it. And then you're just orchestrating state change, but you have full control. So if you want to update your app in a continuous delivery model, sure, go ahead and do it real time. You can do 20 deploys a day. You can do 100 deploys a day. with this kind of agile mindset, you're not doing that in a smart contract on-chain world, right? Like the notion of migrating a complex nested dependency chain of Solidity smart contracts, you're not updating those 50 times a day.
Right.
So anyways, all of that kind of rolled into kind of sets the foundation for the mindset. So then when you take that step back, then it's been our job to kind of say, well, what building blocks and this batteries included mindset do we and should we include so that you don't have to do anything except use the APIs and maintain your key or keys. So that's kind of rooted in our kind of, I guess you'd say, philosophy of why not custom programming language, why not everything's an on-chain contract. We embed the contracts for you, and then you just maintain the logic outside of it when you orchestrate the state changes. So
yeah, making it easier, right? So a lot of what Nate's talking about is these dependencies, and with our ecosystem, it's nice. A lot of it's done for you, and that's the beauty of it.
Definitely, like if I were to use the analogy, like you guys are more like Macs, where like maybe the Ethereum blockchain is something like a Windows computer. Like it's like very modular. You can like plug and play whatever you want to do, but things are more likely to break.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard, I've heard people say, oh, it's, yeah, when we talk to the masses, right? I'm not talking about to developers. I'm saying when we're at trade shows and things like that, and we're talking to people that are just coming in, I always say like, oh, you can do some pretty cool stuff with Ethereum. It's like clay. Like it takes a little while to like put it together. It's kind of heavy and there's, but in the end you can do some pretty cool stuff. But NEM is kind of more like Legos, right? You just kind of, it's pre-templatized and it's really strong and you can build really cool stuff really quickly and it's kind of done for you. The end result is you still have things that you're building and creating, but now you can just use tools that are going to make it easier for you to build faster and securely and customize. And I think that's powerful, right?
it is, yeah. And like on the application side of things, like there is this thing that I don't think a lot of the other media companies put a focus on, and that you guys are also helping Ukraine with their voting systems. And now because we live in a society where every time a candidate loses elections, there are claims of like there was voter fraud and whatnot. And like you guys are pretty much the only ones like doing something about it. So there is a social aspect to it where like, how do you get people to have faith in the blockchain when they clearly do not have faith in paper ballots or in EVMs? And then there is a technological aspect to it. Like, how do you get technologists to believe that such a system cannot be hacked?
Mm-hmm. From a voting, I still think in general the industry is a little premature to implement, wide scale voting using blockchain. That being said, and I'm talking about, massive wide scale, across governments, right? So when I was at the United Nations, speaking in front of, the UN, this was a topic that came up with a lot of the world leaders too that were there, and they are doing pilots to see how things are going. Right, you see a lot of this in the United States, and there's pilots happening. Just like I said with even NEM's elections, we use our NEM. We have a built-in voting tool, but even that, I take a look at the opportunity to be able to track that yes, somebody voted, and yes, they voted at this time, and it's time stamped and it's documented, and you can't falsify it, and it is what it is. But there's still some dependencies there, and more testing and trials that need to happen. I think that the core developers, Jaguar, Gimra, Bloody Rookie, and the community have done an amazing job at contributing to the NEM blockchain in a meaningful way, where we can have tools like this and we can have these use cases, and you're going to see more innovation when you have tools like this that are being tested. So for governments, I don't think it's prime time, but I think that the pilots are really interesting to see behind the scenes of what's happening. We need it now.
Exactly. And like on the technology like side of things, like there is this zero coin protocol as well. And like between the two of you guys, like I guess like that's 90% or like even 99% of all of the research of like voting on the blockchain. So like, do you guys have any thoughts on like how to offset like those Sybil attacks or those 51% attacks, which I guess most of the blockchains are like susceptible to?
I mean, so Nate, you want to go
Yeah, I
in?
mean, so I'll give a somewhat specific answer, but then kind of also be a little vague and generic. So in our world, I mean, our tech and protocols rooted in a proof of stake as far as like
Right.
consensus, and it works by default. You could almost consider by default it's configured for just raw proof of stake. Then through configuration settings, and borrowing from the version 1 proof of importance kind of consensus,
Right.
You can adapt the consensus to how you see fit based on your use case. So obviously the public network that we'll be launching will operate with a certain config and a certain consensus behavior, how it's locked in. But so that's where I kind of gave a specific question. But then being vague, if you say like, hey, we are, let's not even talk about like US elections or, UK elections or something, right? Let's talk about like local, like city council level, and someone wanted to do a similar voting style that we're using for the NEM ecosystem. They could launch a public chain or they could launch a private chain, and it doesn't really matter. Functionally, the network would be doing the same thing. They could launch a public chain or private, still make it auditable, so anyone could like have verifiable data that they would check and download, and then they could configure that network with just tuning a couple knobs when they launch it to decide how the consensus works, right? So if you're launching a 6-server, 6-node, as we refer to it, a private network for local city council voting, and you're going to use it once and then archive that data for like historical verification purposes, and then every year stand up a new network, you can configure it in a very simplified way that kind of gives you total control over kind of how to protect the network, right? Some of that is how to protect the on-chain, like what you talked about, like a 51% attack. And some of it is just having IP connectivity. If I run these in a the city council runs it in a virtual private cloud setup, no one has connectivity to it. So if they can block it off from the world, you just need to make sure you have secure IT practices, but then you can take that data, and after the fact, should someone dispute, you can say, here's the data that was generated, go ahead and verify it, whether you're a third party or a first party or second, right? Doesn't matter. So in our world, that's kind of our mindset. We can kind of operate over this wider spectrum of use cases. So, and then obviously to Alex's point, we're in the early days, so we'll see how things scale. There was, I can't remember which, there's like I forget what they call them. There's it's not a province, but they have a certain name for it. So in Russia, in the Moscow elections, they picked a particular precinct or province or whatever, and they did a pilot in this past year with an e-voting. And so there was I think they used something that was EVM based as the underlying technology combined with traditional software.
Yeah.
How I found out about it was as a pilot project, there was some researchers that discovered several vulnerabilities on it. So they presented those vulnerabilities at an applied cryptography conference. So it's pretty cool though, right? It's like people are trying these experiments. We are, just like the identity space, it's still early days to getting to like massive scale that's like global level, but it's cool, it's exciting.
Yeah, and just one final thought. I think there is a lot of speculation around what blockchain can do, and I hear this a lot from our community. Well, tell me about the new projects and this and that. What's building? A lot of people are building hybrid or private right now. I mean, they'll do testing on public too, but governments and these kind of test cases that are happening, they're not always some are on NBA, right? They're not being talked about, they're being tested. And when it comes out, it's pretty powerful. We just had the Bank of Lithuania for a year worked on a use case on NEM where they have their digital collectible coins, and they built it out using the NEM blockchain technology. Happened a year ago. we're on NDA, just was
Oh.
announced this past month, right? So I do think that 2020 is going to bring, I think you have some pretty big things happening this year in the industry, and I think we are going to see more use cases come out and people start to talk about what they've been building, and that to me is that's what I'm actually looking forward to, is seeing where, not just where they succeeded, but where they failed and how we can improve on those use cases, right? Failure is good. It is. It brings forth change.
Right, and I guess like they have the right person, because like they were talking about digital collectibles, and like you are from a gaming background.
Yeah, I'm
So,
like, bring on Magic the Gathering collectible onto blockchain. Have those, open your packs and get like cryptocurrency that's associated with CCGs. Bring it. I want to see that. But right now, maybe we should just get a couple more use cases before we do that. But it's exciting.
definitely, like we have heard about it all. Like this other day, I was reviewing the story. It was about like how to put your dogs on the blockchain. Like,
But I don't think my dog well, actually, if maybe your pet data, like, I'm one of those weird people that did DNA testing on my dog, because I was like, oh, I have this kind of dog. No, I have a pit bull mix. Oh, okay, I didn't know I had a pit bull mix. All right, but I'm also one of those weird people that also did 23andMe, because I like adding to innovation and seeing where it comes from. But yeah, is it for everything? No, but there's pretty interesting use cases, not just specific to NEM, but I think in the industry around everything from harvesting eggs, for fertility purposes, and using IoT with that. I think that's pretty interesting. I think you're seeing a lot of exciting things happening around AI and blockchain. I think your cybersecurity, there's a lot of cool stuff happening there. Health too. I think a lot of people, when they think of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, they automatically gravitate to fintech. But there's so many interesting cases that are happening outside of just the traditional, healthcare and fintech. There's some pretty cool stuff in the wider, purview that that we're starting to see, and I'm hoping that we'll see more of it on the NEM blockchain.
So we're approaching the hour mark, and I still do have two more questions. One business, and one just like a more broader question of the space. So my first is, and we at HackerNoon, like this morning, just talk about this as well. We had like a 2020 meeting about what we call North Star metric. So something that you like gonna look back, let's say in December 2020 or January of 2021, looking back and be like, if we achieve that, that North Star of the metric, that must mean that we must have a really great 2020. So to you, what is NEM North Star metric right now, and what is the kind of one number or something that like you look back and you can be very proud of that you have achieved that? So that's my first question. And my second is, before I forget, is what, to both of you, what do you think you want your legacy to be, not just for NEM, but just in life, like, what kind of legacy you want to leave this,
awesome.
space with?
So Nate and myself and our, I guess, executive team have put together company-wide goals, and we have very specific company-wide goals for that every single person in the company, they know where their role rolls up to, these company-wide goals. So there's a purpose for everyone, every position, everything that leads up to that company-wide goal, and to be, the most respected blockchain in the industry. Aspirationally, that's what we're going towards. What that looks like manifests in a lot of different ways. But for me personally, when I take a look at where I would like the company to head, I know our developers would like to see 1,000 nodes running, right? Keep the network strong. I want to be able this year, success to me looks like when we launched Symbol from NEM, that it is well executed, that it shows the ease of use, and that it proves that there's equally strong alternatives to Ethereum, and that people can be smarter about the tools that they use to build. So for me, success looks like how many transactions, per second on the chain, how many on the public chain, who's using it, because I have specific kind of system integrators that I have in mind that that we're wanting to partner with, and then are we as a company delivering on the goals of being the most respected blockchain in the industry? I'm not talking about the best, the most respected. What comes with respect is not just the technology, but it's the people and the culture and the governance behind the technology. One of the things I think I want to be remembered for, I've had a career coach for, 15, 20 years. I started that very early on. I really, when I look back on my life, I want to be able to say, I did this together. I experienced the best of life and went on a journey with a bunch of people, and we did these amazing things and look back. So when I look at where I am now leading the NEM Foundation, I'm doing it together. That's why I like open source, and it's why I like why I'm an empathetic leader that likes to work collectively. I want to be remembered as the one that you could count on, and have these amazing experiences with. So that's kind of that's in the core of who I am.
Great. What about you, Nate?
As far as, as Alex mentioned, we kind of have some like org trickling down to department and then individual kind of goals for the year and objectives. Besides just echoing what she said with, obviously public chain adoption, I guess to just highlight a specific one from the tech and product team, it would just be, if we can get, we kind of take this continual improvement mindset. So no matter how good you are, you can always be getting better. So
Iterations.
Yeah, and so it's just this continual improvement. And so when you reflect that back through launching something new and adoption, it goes into how easy is the tech to understand, whether you are a non-technical person who wants to get some cryptocurrency in the wallet from an exchange or etc. What's that experience like, and what's the tech like, and how does it function? If you're a highly technical developer or an applied cryptography practitioner and seeing how this platform can be like a tool or a weapon for you and implementing change or whatever. Obviously, we're heavily focused on businesses. So, in our world, a business should look at adopting our technology no different than adopting, hey, we got MySQL, we got Postgres, we got these other cloud services. Hey, this is just another one. Let's read the documentation, but it's business as usual. We don't need to, spend 3x on headcounts and train people for 6 to 12 months. So I guess an artificial metric would be in the next year, we engage in a decent scale pilot or large scale pilot with an enterprise that has been in blockchain for several years, and they get to us and they say somewhere between half to 1 order of magnitude improvement in their creation and onboarding process, right? So if someone took them 6 months to onboard on a tiny Ethereum pilot, they should be able to onboard in like 6 days with us or something like that. Yeah. It's like, so at like a kind of artificial metric level, those are things that we would like to see, right? I guess just on a personal level, I've been always blessed with, I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I've always been in the area, and I've always been in tech. So I've always just worked on cool projects, so my first jobs out of university were kind of just organic. I got jobs and I worked in them. And then for the last 15 years, I've always been lucky to be able to choose projects. So as far as like less about a legacy than it is, well, I hope for the next 20 years, as long as I decide I want to work, which will probably be forever, I basically get to continue to choose to work on projects with people that are fun to work with stuff that's cutting edge. I'm kind of equally excited and scared because the the rate of change in this first part of my career, the acceleration in the past decade is insane. And so if this acceleration curve, as the futurists would tell you, is not going to change, it's going to continue to accelerate. It's fun and kind of scary to see, like, in the next 10 to 15 years, what other opportunities to work on cool projects that are, life-changing is probably a little too extreme of a way to describe it, because people say, I want to create tech that like changes people's lives. Like, let's say affects people's lives for the better or just for the fun, right? The other thing is, open source has been around for a while, and I became interested in it like pretty early on coming out of university. So being lucky enough to work in the origins of the commercial open source software space, I didn't really appreciate it until the past couple of years when it's become like a bigger thing. So like you'll talk to some people that are like, oh, the commercial open source space is this new thing. And it's like, well, it's been around for a couple decades, but it's pretty prevalent, right? So it's fun. So like I think from an ongoing, future legacy perspective, like it's more about, I hope I just get to continue to choose to work on fun projects and work in the areas that are most intriguing with fun people. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is
Great.
this kind of culture that we're trying to attract, right? I'm going to do a plug though. We're doing our test net right now. We're looking for people like your audience to come in and break a bunch of stuff that we've made. So we're looking for folks to jump into our test net and try things out. So I do hope folks will go and check out NEM and check out the latest product that we have, Symbol from NEM, and then join the movement that Nate and I are part of. It's really amazing. It's really fun. And it keeps changing, so it keeps it interesting.
Where could people find you on the internet, each of you?
NEM.io is the company website. You can always find me on LinkedIn. It's under Alexander Tinsman. And as far as Twitter, because, the whole world is on Twitter right now. You can find me at inside_NEM. I run a channel, a social media channel where I do videos and talk about the technology too. But so I'm inside_NEM to talk about all the inside things with NEM.
Where can people find you, Nate?
I'm pretty much, my handle everywhere is Kaizen. So you can pretty much, I would be partially active on Twitter depending on week to week, mostly about non-crypto stuff. But yeah, actually obviously we can send it to you after the fact, but yeah, Kaizen is kind of my handle everywhere. So, as far as the project goes, we have our community Slack, so people can find me there as well as everyone else that's contributing to the ecosystem, all the core devs and whatnot. And then outside of the NEM world, Kaizen is usually the easiest way to hunt me down.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. I think it was a very informative and educational, inspiring, conversation with both of you. I hope that you get to deliver your message to a lot more people, and a lot more people will understand NEM in the larger context of things. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
thanks for joining us. That's a wrap, guys.
Super fun.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right. I think we can stop the recording now.
Well, thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Cool. And you have the